Okay, welcome to the latest edition, the PIAA edition of the WPIAL Blitz Show. I'm Badge. To my left or your right, or I don't know whose direction there. There's my buddy Ian. And we are just so thankful to have head coach of Governor Mifflin, Jeff Lang, with us. Coach, how are you tonight?
Doing well, Bruce. Thank you very much. Doing well.
Well, good. It's been a great year for Governor Mifflin. A lot of firsts. This is your first time or in school history that you're a district champion, have gone this far in the PIAA. What's the excitement been like around school so far?
Just a lot of support. The teachers, the faculty, the students, they're all excited for us. The kids are excited about being there on the team. And we really have a team that believes that, they can do something here.
Yeah, Coach, earlier this year we spoke and, you mentioned about the leadership, the senior leadership, on this team. Talk a little bit about not only your senior leadership, but just the leadership on the team and some of the players that, a lot of the fans in the WPIAL should be looking at.
Yeah, they're hungry. Right from the seniors to some of our underclassmen, starts with Cameron Stewart and Brandon Strouser, two of our, kids that have been playing for starting 3 years there, Dominic Scheide, Connor Marinac, our quarterback, and, trickling down just even to the younger kids, Nick Singleton, one of our junior running backs, and we got a couple other juniors in there, Trey Rock and Nate Goodman, that are playing a lot of football for us. And they're just, the kids are hungry, they're excited, and, they're holding each other accountable. And they've been doing that all the way back since, January, when we were doing, winter workouts in the gym.
Ian, you got a question for Coach?
Sure. First off, thanks a lot for joining us. We really appreciate it. It's great to get some perspective from all around the state. When Bruce and I started doing this, it was, really heavy WPIAL focus. But now as we move into the state playoffs, it's really cool to get to highlight kind of both sides of what is the premier matchup in the state this week. So you mentioned, this is a historic season for Governor Mifflin, farthest you've ever reached in the playoffs, first district championship. How are you kind of not keeping the expectations down, but keeping the kids in line and keeping them focused, and kind of tuning out the outside pressure?
This whole year we've been successful with all of our games and, the mercy rules and all that stuff. And I just keep telling the kids, it's about us. It's about us getting better week to week and just taking care of our business. If we could play Mifflin football, keep things clean and keep getting better each day in practice, keep getting better each week at the games, that we could go as far as we want, but to focus on the matter at hand, and that's that day, because with this whole COVID year, you don't even know if you're going to get it next day, let alone the next game. So come out every day to practice, have fun, get better, enjoy each other, and just enjoy the game of football. And that's kind of the mentality that the kids have been taking on all year.
That's awesome. That's a great point with COVID too. How's your team been able to kind of handle the ups and downs with everything that's happened this year?
Good. I mean, we had a long summer when you think about it, because, we started, July 1st, which was kind of late, but then we just kept getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. And then we finally got our game in against Wilson, had a great game, one of the best games we ever played against them in school history. And then, we come out to practice on Tuesday, or I don't know if it was Monday or Tuesday, but then all of a sudden, we're quarantined because of some issue in school. So we lost a week there against Central Dauphin East, but that really woke the kids up, where they saw it wasn't even a kid on the team that had an issue. It was somebody in the school that they closed us down and we couldn't play. So I think that was a wake up call to them. And, they saw what happened to Warwick last week with the district game and against us. And there's been a lot of teams around the state that have fallen victim to it. So they know that, every chance, every time we turn the corner, the possibility of pulling the plug could be there. So they do really get out to practice, and we get it on pretty good out there.
Well, you're playing Pine Richland this week, Coach. Tell us a little scouting report, from your perspective on Pine Richland.
They're really good. They are, first, a very well coached football team. You can see that in every aspect of their game. starting with their offense. They run that spread pro style offense, and the quarterback Cole Spencer, he's just on the mark all the time. He's got a really big, solid offensive line in front of him who blocks very well for him, and he's got receivers and athletes that just make great plays on offense. Defensively, they're big up front. They're aggressive up front. They're very good, disciplined up front. The linebackers are very fast, very aggressive, and their D-backs are really good. So, for every position on the field, it's going to be the best matchup we've seen this year.
Yeah, clearly.
And I'm not blowing smoke either when I say this is the premier game of the week in the state. I mean, you guys have D1 recruits on your side. They've got D1 recruits on their side. It's going to be – I'm really looking forward to this matchup. It's going to be a really fun matchup to watch, especially with, Nick Singleton going against their defense, because I don't know if Pine Richland's seen a running back like him yet this year.
Right. Yeah. And, we're obviously Nick's a big part of our offense, but, again, the way we run the option, you got Brandon Strauss and Trey Rock splitting duties at fullback who've been very successful for us, and Connor Marinac, who's just reading the option very well. And, when we're see somebody falling asleep on defense or they're overplaying our run, he's been on the money with open receivers down the field.
Yeah, I mean, I think that from a passing perspective, it's probably the weapon in the arsenal that you haven't had to draw on, but's really there. So as you go into a postseason like this, or a postseason matchup, I mean, I don't want to kind of draw your hand or whatever like that, but I mean, everything's on the table. It seemed like some of the things you put on film. Guy even had Nick Singleton playing in the red gun one time, and you've put a lot of passing in recent weeks on film. So what are some of the philosophical things that that you go into this from a planning perspective, not tipping your hand, but how does the coach get them ready?
Yeah, those are some look at Wildcat formation you're talking about. Those are some looks and formations we've been working on since January that we just haven't been in really a game to use it this year. So we got to that last game of our regular season, and I said, hey, if we're going to start using this stuff in the playoffs, we've got to practice it a little bit against a live team instead of against our scout team during the week. And, and it's another wrinkle that other coaches got to prepare for. When you don't play against the option, it's tough to prepare for it in the 3 or 4 days of practice. You have to practice for it, but now you got a couple other things they got to prepare for. So it takes time out of their practice. So,
Ian, you have another question for Coach?
Pardon me?
Ian, you got another question for Coach there?
Yeah, so just last thing, obviously, like we said, historic season. Congratulations to you guys. What's been your favorite memory so far this year?
Favorite memory so far this year?
And obviously it's not over yet, so that could change, but
I would say just, obviously winning the games we have, coming out the way we did in the beginning of the season to beat Wilson West Lawn, who's a very, very good football in the state year in, year out. I thought they got robbed of the District 3 playoffs and getting into the playoffs there. They should have been in when Harrisburg got pulled out, and I think they would have won some games there. So that was exciting beating them. But, just our kids taking care of business every week in, week out through our section, and coming out against Mechanicsburg, who I thought was a very good offense, pretty potent offense. And, defensively, we just stuck it to them. They had no answer for us. So our defense has been a huge standout for us this year, and I think that's what I'm most proud of. Well,
as a guy who's broadcast some of your games or whatever like that, it's been a lot of fun to watch. I'll be over there in Hollidaysburg on Saturday as well. So, best of luck, Coach. We'll see how it, plays out on Saturday. But, this is what it's all about, isn't it?
It is. I tell you, as I tell our kids, and the coach has been preaching, it comes down to this point in the season, who wants it the most? If you have evenly matched teams with athletes, it boils down to mentally who wants it the most and who's going to put it on the line. Well, listen, thank you very much, Jeff. I know you stayed up a little bit late tonight for the interview here, but thank you very much and best of luck. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.
See you later.
We appreciate it.
See you Saturday. Bye-bye. So I just tune out? Yep. All right.
Great.
You know, of all of our guests, we've never really had a problem in him getting out. So. But anyway, so yeah, I know Coach Lang pretty well. Obviously, doing the Governor Mifflin games. I live in the Governor Mifflin School District. You know, full disclosure here. Um, you know, pretty close with these guys. I guess if there's a team that I know about, it's probably Governor Mifflin. And you know, it's going to be great. You know, we're going to have um, Coach Kasperowitz, you know, a little bit later in the show, join us from Pine Richland. And like you said, Ian, this is definitely the premier matchup in the PIAA playoffs this week. So I think I've got to let's see, give you the ability to pull up your
Oh
stuff
yeah.
here.
Yeah, we could talk through some of that. Another really cool note, and we can mention this too when Pine Richland's coach Eric comes on, that he actually played on the 1993 state championship team for North Hills and then coached Pine Richland to the 2017 state championship team. So I'm not sure how many people out there have both won a state championship as a player and a coach, but I got to think it's a pretty rare crowd that Coach Kasperowitz is part of. So we can ask him if he knows how many people have accomplished that feat, but he's certainly one of them, which is pretty darn cool. Actually, that 93 North Hills team that he was the quarterback of had a freshman named LeVar Arrington who wound up being a pretty good player.
Yeah, a little bit. You know, the funny thing is, too, is Coach played in the 1994 Big 33 game, and he was tossing to a buddy of mine, Daryl Daniel, who I do my Fresh Set of Down show, which is my District 3 show here. And Daryl was the 94 MVP, so Coach had a lot to do, I'm sure, with getting Daryl the MVP trophy there too. So another little just funny little connection. I wonder if he'll remember Daryl. I don't know. Maybe he'll have some, I'm sure he'll have some memories about games like that. Those have to be games that, for an athlete like that, really have to kind of live in their memory bank.
Oh yeah, and especially with the streak that the Big 33 game has, that they've had somebody who's played in that game play in the Super Bowl every year so far. So, that's a pretty cool stat that, you play in that game, you kind of start to think, hey, maybe I'll get to play in the Super Bowl someday too, because someone's done it in every Super Bowl.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, well, why don't we dive right in, man? We've got, a lot of games here too. And there we go. All right.
We go. Yep. It's the PIAA semifinals edition. We are on the road to Hershey. Hopefully we get there. As we've seen some COVID cases on the rise statewide. Hopefully everyone out there that's listening is staying safe, staying healthy. I saw today the city of Philadelphia just passed some fairly restrictive measures that go into effect later this month. So we'll see how that all kind of plays out. And hopefully we're able to get all these games in, and hopefully everyone is, stayed safe and healthy. We had the WPIAL championships this past weekend. The WPIAL was able to get through their entire playoff bracket with no playoff games canceled, which was excellent. Our 6 champions were Central Catholic in 6A, which we talked about last week, which happened the week before. And then on WPIAL championship weekend, we had Pine Richland winning 5A, Thomas Jefferson winning 4A, Central Valley winning 3A, Beaver Falls winning 2A, and Jeanette winning in 1A. And we'll talk about each of those championship games a little bit later. As far as the all-time championships go, Jeanette and Thomas Jefferson won their 10th, moving them up to 4th all-time. Aliquippa is still well out in front with 17. Clairton lost to Jeanette in the final there, so they're still on 14. Jeanette's up to 10 now. Central Catholic won their 8th. Pine Richland won their 7th. Beaver Falls won their 5th. And Central Valley won their 4th. But the incredible accomplishment there is Central Valley's only been a school since 2010, so that's 4 WPIAL titles in 11 years, because they were formed by the merger of Center and Monaca. So Monaca had won 3 WPIAL titles before that. I should note that Pine Richland has 7 in total. 2 of those came when they were Richland High School, before they were renamed as Pine Richland. I think the renaming happened in the late 80s, early 90s, somewhere around there. They built a brand new high school, beautiful facility. But that was when it got renamed, because there was Pine Middle School and Richland High School that served Pine Township and Richland Township, and they built one consolidated high school.
Nice.
So in 6A, we'll breeze through this kind of quickly here, because there wasn't a whole lot of excitement in 6A this week. St. Joe's Prep kind of just got a bye to the semifinals because District 12 didn't play a lot of games, and now it's kind of a question mark over whether or not they're even going to be able to continue in the tournament because of the city of Philadelphia's restrictions that are going into place. Central Catholic, the WPIAL champion, had to forfeit their game against Erie McDowell because of some COVID cases at Central Catholic, so they opted not to play. So McDowell got a bye into the semifinals, and McDowell hasn't played a playoff game either because their first round game against Erie High got canceled as well. So McDowell and St. Joe's Prep both got to the semifinals without playing a game in the state tournament yet. On the bottom half, there have been games. Central York and Souderton both making their first PIAA semifinal appearance, at least based on the information I was able to find, that this is their first trip to the semifinals. So we'll see. Hopefully these games are able to be played, but we'll see what happens. McDowell's been here before, but they've never reached the state championship game. St. Joe's Prep obviously has been here before. They're the 5-time state champions and have won the 6A tournament the last 2 years. And Central York and Souderton have never been this far before. So a historic season for a few teams, but we'll see whether or not this one actually gets played out or how this one finishes.
Look, I'm going under the assumption that they're going to figure out a way to play these games. I know that, there's restrictions and whatever like that. I got to believe that they're going to allow these championships to continue. And I, quite honestly, I was very impressed with Central York's win last week. I mean, at Del Val, that's a good football team. I had seen Del Val earlier this year. A buddy of mine, Bob Long, broadcast the game when LaSalle College was up there. And, I tell you, Central York, though, I mean, Bo Prabula, I mean, he is the real deal. I mean, he did it with his arm and his legs. And, you have to give him a lot of credit, some of these teams, and some of the reoccurring theme that I'm going to talk about in here is the whole emotional aspect of postseason football and what I see. And, they haven't achieved, a goal yet. I mean, they got, their district championship, with William Penn, somewhat of an emotional win there, but they still have a lot of that emotion left in the tank. I think it's going to be really hard for McDowell to flip the switch. Just like you said, they haven't played in how many weeks? And you don't just flip the switch on postseason, football and emotions, like that. They haven't been able to simulate things. Here's Central York coming off a big emotional road win. They're going out to Mansion Park to play these guys. I tell you what, Central York on a roll. I like them. I got to believe that we're going to, see that game between St. Joe Prep and Souderton somehow, some way. And so I like the fact that, it's going to be really interesting. I think it's going to be a kind of David versus Goliath, matchup, I think, for a state title. What do you think?
I mean, anyone playing St. Joe's Prep at this point is a David versus Goliath matchup. And I agree with you about McDowell. They haven't played. October 30th was their last game. So it'll be nearly a month that they haven't actually played a game.
Yeah.
And I mean, you see it with NFL teams coming off a bye week when they haven't played in a week that they're a little bit rusty, and it takes them a quarter or two to get into the game. And against a high school team that can score the way some of these teams can score, you can't give up a quarter, getting your legs back under you. You might be down 21-28 nothing by that point. The game might be over. So, I think you're right. It's going to be tough for McDowell coming out against a Central York team that, has really put up some points the last few weeks too. I mean, 48 against William Penn and 49 last week.
Yeah. They can put some points on the board for sure.
Yep. So moving on to 5A, this is going to segue really nicely into Coach Kasperowicz joining us here. Pine Richland really just took it to Peters Township. Peters Township was making their second consecutive WPIAL final appearance, which was last year was the first time they ever made it to the WPIAL championship game in school history. They lost by 1 point to Gateway last year, got revenge on Gateway in the semifinals last week by 1 point. But this one, Pine Richland was just a machine, and really the defense really kind of stole the show for Pine Richland. Peters Township had 4 drives into the red zone and came away with no points. And Pine Richland was up 28-0 at halftime, scored another touchdown pretty early in the third quarter. The mercy rule was enacted and kind of just rolled on to victory. And interestingly enough, that Coach Lang mentioned Cole Spencer for Pine Richland, who's thrown for a ton of yards this year. He's thrown for over 2,000 yards.
Yeah.
But Pine Richland really did it with their running game, because Peters Township, we talked about last week how good their secondary was with Donovan McMillan, who's going to Florida at safety, Braylon Carrington, a couple other guys, Corbin Hondrew is a linebacker but can cover a lot of the field. That Peters had a really good secondary, so Pine Richland did it on the ground. They just went ground and pound, and Cole Spencer ran for over 100 yards and threw for over 100, accounted for 3 touchdowns, 2 rushing, 1 passing, and it was a really solid all around performance for Pine Richland. They looked like the best team all year, and they proved it on the field. And now we're going to get a really good matchup against Governor Mifflin. I mean, just looking at them, obviously playing in different leagues, but defensively both holding teams to under 10 points a game. Offensively, Pine Richland was over 50 points a game until last week, when they only scored 35 in the WPIAL championship. But that was one of those cases where once you hit the running clock, it's kind of, and you're running the ball, you're just trying to get out of there without getting anyone hurt too bad. So, their average came down under 50, but both teams averaging, we'll call it over 49 plus per game. Both of them are undefeated. Pine Richland can throw the ball. Governor Mifflin can run the ball. So a nice, interesting contrast of styles here. And hopefully Coach Kasperowicz will talk about it a little bit too. But Pine Richland really runs like a run-pass option kind of offense. And Cole Spencer's been starting since his sophomore year, when Pine Richland won a WPIAL title and lost to St. Joe's Prep in the PIAA semifinals. So, this team with this group of starters hasn't won a state title. And, they followed up that 2017 team that won the state title and repeated as WPIAL champions, which was a surprise to a lot of people that, a group of sophomores came in and started for Pine Richland and wound up winning the WPIAL title. And they lost in the championship game last year in 6A to Central Catholic, moved down to 5A this year, and really just dominated everyone. So it'll be interesting to see, what kind of offense is able to prevail, whether it's the running attack or the passing attack, and whose defense can really scheme up to stop the other team's offense, because it's going to be a very good contrast of styles and how they want to play offense. But like we talked about, Governor Mifflin has that option. They can always throw the ball down the field too. But Pine Richland's got some ballers all over the field. Defensive end Miguel Jackson, who's going to Liberty. Harrison Hayes, another lineman, who's going to Liberty. Luke Miller, a linebacker. I don't think he's committed anywhere yet, but he's got a bunch of D1 offers. Artie Burns' younger brother. So if you remember, Artie Burns was a first-round draft pick for the Steelers out of Miami a couple years ago. I think he didn't get his 5th-year option picked up. He went and signed with the Chicago Bears, tore his ACL at the beginning of this year. But his younger brother plays for Pine Richland. I think he's a senior. So, just another really, really deep defensive team for Pine Richland, and a loaded offense that can really score from anywhere with the passing attack that they have. So it should be a good game. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, obviously the uniqueness about it is that both of these teams have just, mercy ruled every single, opponent that they've had this year. The one thing, the very interesting stat that I found, from Pine Richland when I was doing my research was that this group was like their only home loss was against IMG, a couple years ago. Other than that, they were pretty much undefeated at home as a class.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that says a lot, because, the type of competition that they typically play in the WPIAL.
Yep.
But Governor Mifflin, obviously, a run-oriented team. They can throw the football. You've got on there the players there, Nick Singleton, Brandon Strasser, got him as a running back, but he was like Burke's league linebacker of the year last year, and is a stalwart on defense. Cam Stewart, who is going to Rutgers, he's 6'7", like, I ask him every game how much he weighs, and he said, well, I like to be around 253, 256, somewhere in there. But he's a big guy, and he's a defensive end. And, that's going to be, Pine Richland's got a quick passing game there too. But, I'm interested to see how they handle Cam Stewart, and what have you, in game plan for him. As you mentioned, Nick Singleton, he's got offers from everywhere, and he's improved every single game that I've seen him play this week. Pine Richland, enormously impressive. It was funny. I was watching the interview with the Peters Township head coach post game there, and they asked him, like, hey, what would be in your mind? What do you have to do to beat this Pine Richland team? And he said, well, you're going to have to run the football, and that's what Governor Mifflin does. I mean, they run the football. They run the football well. They can sprinkle in some passes, and this can come down to special teams. I mean, and I'm not familiar with Pine Richland special teams or whatever like that, but always talk about special teams a lot. I haven't seen, let's just say I've seen a lot of extra points and things like that, kickoffs with Governor Mifflin, because they scored so many points or whatever like that. They've got a pretty solid special teams. It may come down to that. I don't think I've even seen a bad snap on an extra point for Governor Mifflin this year. So it may come down to that. I mean, these are two good, solid teams. But look at the pedigree on Pine Richland. They won a 6A state title. Look at the district championships they have. This is an uncharted territory for Governor Mifflin, but quite honestly, they've still got a lot of emotion in the tank. Had they played the district championship game, that was what Governor Mifflin's always aspired to do. This was their first championship in school history. So they still got a lot of emotions in that tank. They didn't get spent. A lot of teams, their goal is to just get to the district, and they get to the PIAA and they're spent. That emotionally, they're just shot. They have nothing left. I think Governor Mifflin's got a lot left in the tank. Obviously, Pine Richland aspires for, the state championship. And I think especially this group. I mean, you hear Coach Kasparowicz talk about everything is finished for them.
Yep.
And so it's going to be really interesting to see how this all plays out, because neither team has played any level of the competition that they're going to be going up against, in this game. So what do you think, Ian?
Yeah, that's the real key, is that, it's really easy to find offensive statistics for people online, which is usually why I list people by offensive position. But you're absolutely right. Like, a lot of these guys are defensive studs too, and they deserve recognition. And when you watch them play on the field, it's like, oh wow, the defenses usually, when you see matchups like this with teams that can score a lot but also have pretty stout defenses, the team that can have the edge on defense is the one that's really able to come out on top. And that's what it comes down to, is can Pine Richland stop Governor Mifflin's running game? And I think Nick Singleton's a junior, right? And he's the top ranked junior in the state, I think. So
yeah, correct. He's a junior. He became Governor Mifflin's all-time leading rusher the second game of this season. So, he's been kind of it. And he's scored literally. He's a threat to take it to the house from anywhere. I mean, Brandon Strasser, we talked about him also as being a defensive stalwart for Governor Mifflin. Connor Marinack, the quarterback, good athlete, hasn't had to necessarily, pull out the passing game too much. But that's the thing is that Governor Mifflin's usually about 3 for 5 passing with like 2 touchdowns every game.
Yeah.
And Governor Mifflin actually, I think against Mifflin County, you talked about that one team that scored on all the different aspects of the game. Well, against Mifflin County, that was Governor Mifflin. They had a interception return touchdown, fumble return touchdown, kickoff return touchdown, punt return touchdown, receiving touchdown, running touchdown. I mean, they scored in, every aspect there. So, it was very interesting. And let's see here. I'm just going to send a quick text to.
Sure. So while you do that, I'll just move on to the state bracket real quick, where obviously we have Pine Richland against Governor Mifflin here on the left-hand side of the bracket. Winner obviously goes to Hershey for the state title game. And on the other side, it's Erie Cathedral Prep, who moved up from 4A to 5A this year, taking on Upper Dublin. So we'll see how that one goes. Cathedral Prep had a lot of success in 4A, and we're kind of forced up into 5A by the success formula this year. So we'll see what happens on that side. WPIAL teams do have a fairly extensive history running into Cathedral Prep in the playoffs. So if Cathedral Prep comes out on top there, it's going to be an interesting state championship game between whoever they have to face between Pine Richland and Governor Mifflin. And I
think I've said all along that I favored Prep, on that side of the bracket since they got over there, and it is going to be kind of a long drive for both of them there. But all right, here's Coach Kasparowicz.
All right.
Hello.
Coach.
Hey, Coach. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. What's going on?
We're hoping that we could get your video on.
Yeah. Let me see here.
There he is.
Perfect. All right.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Joining us, Coach.
Yep. We were just talking through the 5A semifinals and the exciting matchup between Pine Richland and Governor Mifflin here. Talked with Governor Mifflin's coach a little earlier on about their big-time rushing game with Nick Singleton, who's one of the top-ranked juniors in the state. And he mentioned how good, obviously, your passing game is, specifically mentioned Cole Spencer, Eli Yoakum, and all those guys. So, your message all year has been for your team to finish after, losing to St. Joe's Prep 2 years ago in the state semis, losing to Central Catholic last year. With this group of kids, a lot of them have been starting since they were sophomores and had an incredibly successful high school career. So first off, congratulations on capturing another WPIAL championship. And how are you feeling heading into the state playoffs?
Yeah, thank you. No, we're blessed. We're fortunate. We've had a great season, but we're very aware of the situation and how crazy of a year it's been. So we're blessed to be where we're at, and we're 9-0 or something like that, and still playing. So that's good. And we got a tough Governor Mifflin team. Just been able to playing on a Saturday. Evening's tough because you kind of lose a day, but I guess we're not playing until Saturday next week, so it feels like you're a day behind. So just start diving into those guys, and I know they had a week off last week, so I'm sure they were a week ahead, kind of breaking us down, or Peters, whoever they, I guess put more thought into. But either way, really got a good look at them here today and yesterday, and they're a good football team. There's no doubt. I mean, it's talk about a clash of styles. We could throw it or run it. I think we have the perception that we throw it a lot, and we do, but they run the ball. That's what they do, and if we don't stop Nick Singleton, it's going to be a long night for us.
Coach, you have a lot of, postseason experience as a coach. I mean, do you take postseason game? I mean, obviously, most of those are win and go home. But do you take a different approach to a postseason game than you do a regular season game?
No, not really. No, every game's, we try to, every game's just as important as the last, as the next. Like you said, we've played a lot of postseason games, and we feel comfortable there. It's not a big deal to us per se, but we want to treat each opponent with the same amount of respect. Now, with this being said, this is a state semifinal game. Obviously, this carries a lot of weight. You lose and you go home, so it's not that we treat it any different, but I think the kids are aware of the situation at hand and what's at stake. As proud as we are to be where we're at right now, it would be heartbreaking to lose this football game. So, we're going to put it all out there on the line. I know my staff's working hard to get a good plan together, and our kids, want to just go out and execute it.
So you have the unique experience of having won a state title as both a player and a coach. Out of curiosity, because I don't know, do you know, is there anyone else that's done that?
No, that's it. As far as I know, I've had a couple of media guys ask me. They did some research, and no, as a head coach, I'm sure there's some assistant coaches out there that played on a state championship team. But no, I'm not. That's again blessed. I was a part of a great high school program at North Hills. Back in the late 80s, they were the, number one team in the country at USA Today back in like 1987 before, internet and all that stuff. And then 93, when I played, we won the state title and we were finished number 2 behind Cleveland St. Ignatius in the country, that USA Today poll. So we still finished pretty high up there. And then, I was fortunate enough to, coach here at Pine Richland. And, we got a great program and great school district with great players and great staff. And, we were fortunate enough to play in 2 state championships already. We lost one, came up a little short, and we were able to win one in 17. And, we're hoping to get another one this year, but none of that happens if we don't take care of business on Saturday afternoon versus the Mustangs.
So building off that, and not to put you too much on the spot, but how do you feel like this team compares to the Ben DiNucci team, the Phil Dracovic team, that, the other WPIAL championship teams that you've had? Obviously, this team with, Cole Spencer won a title a couple years ago, but, this is their senior class this year.
Yeah, it's tough to compare, but I mean, that 17 team was pretty darn good. I mean, it's hard to beat that deal. I mean, who knows? This story is still being written. There's still a couple chapters left, hopefully 2 chapters. And if we would happen to go out that way, that's 2 championships, for Cole Spencer, who passed all those guys you just mentioned in most of the stat books. 17 team was darn good. 14 team was kind of the first one, kind of took it slow, and it came on at the end, and really, really came on at the end. They both had their strengths and weaknesses. And ask me that in about, 15 days, and I'll give you a better answer.
That sounds good.
Yeah, you've had a lot of stability in your coaching staff, through this whole process as well. How valuable do you think that is for you attaining success year after year?
I think that's the common denominator, without a doubt. I mean, you have continuity. It doesn't matter. Kids come and go. You have your kids in high school. We don't recruit. We're not a Catholic school, that can pull kids in. And we have the kids that live within our 10-mile radius, and they come to school. And some years they're big and fast. Some years they're short and slow, and you got to kind of figure it out. But the one constant is this staff, and we can, we're together. We know what's expected. The expectation's there. There's no, not many discussions needed to be had. I mean, the precedent is there. The culture's there. All 15 of us that are on staff understand that culture, and on a daily basis we come in and do the right thing, whether it's in practice, whether it's in the weight room, whether it's heck, in Zoom meetings this past COVID quarantine. Nonetheless, the culture's there, and it all starts with my staff. It's modeling, right? The way we act, the way we carry ourselves, the way we coach, the way we treat our kids. That's how we're able to get so much out of our team.
Yeah, that's great. And I think what you talked about too is really important, that, having kind of seen you over the years, that your team isn't sort of locked into, we're like McKeesport, we're just going to run the triple option, or, you've been able to, some years you run the ball a lot, some years you've been able to throw the ball a lot. You've been able to do both, basically based on the talent you've had on the field, and be successful doing both, which speaks to the stability of your staff as well.
Sure. In offense, obviously we get a lot of notoriety because we score a lot of points. And, but yeah, you're going back to Ben DiNucci, that was as spread as you can come. We were 10 personnel the whole time, throwing it around the yard. And, ran the ball pretty well, but it was, pretty spread out. Then Phil Dracovic was more spread to run. He could carry the football now, and he was a threat. You go to 2018, the WPIAL championship, where we lost to St. Joe's in the semis of the state. That was more of just a run heavy. We had, a couple big linemen in there that we kind of ran behind. And this year's, kind of a mishmash of everything. We throw it, we run it. We have tons of formations and motions and shifts. Common denominator, though, is, the quarterback's got to be able to throw the football. You got to be able to push the ball downfield, and that's something that we take a lot of pride in. We start that with our middle school programs. We're eyeballing those kids in 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and we throw the ball down there. And to be a quarterback here at Pine Richland, you got to be able to throw the football, period. Now, if you can run it, great. If you can do some other things, great, but you got to be able to throw the ball. And then on defense, we just want to be attacking. We want to be aggressive and ultimately, force the opponent, make them uncomfortable, and get the ball back to our offense.
Yeah, your defense. Let's not sell your defense short. I mean, you just shut out. You just had a shutout in the WPIAL championship game. Who are some of the guys on defense that we should be looking for in this game with Governor Mifflin?
Yeah, we got a bunch, man. Starting up front, Miguel Jackson, 3-year starter. All-time sack leader at Pine Richland, going to Liberty. He's a stud, just a difference maker. You can better account for him, or he's going to give you some fits. Linebacking core, I think we got the best linebacking core in the state, without a doubt. Luke Miller heading to Kent State. Jeremiah Hazley's a junior. He's a Division I recruit. He'll be playing at Power 5 level. He'll be playing at a Penn State, a Pitt, Ohio State next year, or in 2 years. He's 6'3", 215 pounds, just a tremendous athlete. And then you got a kid in the middle, Zach Borgenka, who's right up there, I think second on the team in tackles. He does a little bit of everything. He's sometimes our kicker, first-year starter, but he's been tremendous at that position. It helps when you have 3 good ones. You kind of can't handle them all. And then in the back end, we got Caden Schweiger, who's a 3-year starter. And then we got Sam Neal, who's playing cornerback. He's been tremendous for us. He's a physical player, lockdown corner. So we got a lot of nice players over there. And again, defense, there's a lot about attitude there. It's a lot about running to the football. It's a lot about just believing in what the coach is telling you to do. And when you get there, you be a little bit upset when you get there, and take care of business. So
I'm going to have to remember that. You have to be a little bit upset when you get there. That's a good line. I like that. Any last question there, Ian?
So Bruce, I think you had one because you do a show with someone that Coach Kasparowicz played with.
Oh, yeah, actually. Yeah, Daryl Daniel, who was the 94, Big 33 MVP. Daryl and I do a show, out here, and do you remember, those kind of games? Obviously you have a storied career, not only as a player but a coach, but do you remember those big games, pretty distinctly?
Sure. Daryl, yeah, he's actually, I haven't talked to him in probably about a year or so, but he texted me here or there. I mean, last year, maybe the year before. Because we played, you kind of knew about him in high school, played a Big 33 together. I was a quarterback. He was a receiver, threw him, a bunch of balls, and he had a great game there. And then he went on to Syracuse, and I played at Pitt, and we played against each other for 4 years. So we battled there, and he was a great athlete. Nothing but great things to say about Daryl. But yeah, for sure. I mean, that's what my wife always makes fun of me. I can't remember to pick up milk on the way home, but I remember what we did on 3rd and 23, from the minus 48-yard line to convert on that first down.
Well, that's a lot of fun. That's great stuff. Look, Coach, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it. I'll be at the game there on Saturday, so on the sidelines. So I hope to say hello to you personally there, and thank you as well. So really appreciate it. Go get yourself a good night's sleep and get after it again tomorrow, right?
Appreciate it. That's what it's all about. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right. Thank you so much.
Take care. We really appreciate it. And congrats again on the WPIAL title.
Thank you.
Take care. Take care now. All right. Wow. Really great stuff, man. Yep. Both 5A, the coaches here and, Eric. Wow. What a great guy.
Yeah, and to be the only person that's won a state title as a player and a coach, we got an answer to that. So we know now, or as a head coach, I should say, but that's really cool. And I think, you talked about the emotions on sort of Governor Mifflin's side that they didn't get to play last week for that district title. I think it helps Pine Richland that, this group of seniors, a lot of them, Cole Spencer, Eli Yoakum, a couple of the other ones, Miguel Jackson, all the guys that Coach Kasperowicz mentioned that have been 3-year starters for them, that 2017 team that was absolutely loaded with Phil Dracovic and all those other guys who are great players. They graduated a huge senior class after they won that title. And you mentioned that game against IMG that they scheduled for the following year, which was really sort of the break-in game for a lot of these kids.
Well, that kind of like those kind of the made for ESPN games everybody was scheduling.
Yeah, and that was a game where it was like, IMG was ranked, one of the top teams in the country out of Florida. They recruit nationally, but they do that.
Yeah.
And then, Pine Richland was one of the top ranked teams in Pennsylvania coming off that 6A state championship, but it graduated that whole team. So if the prior year's teams had played, it would have been a lot closer. I think that game was like 40-0 or something. But I think it also gave those kids on Pine Richland a sense of, this is who we want to compete with, and this is what we need to do. It was a good learning experience for them. A lot of them as sophomores starting their first game.
Sure.
And, as sophomores, they won the WPIAL title and made it to the state semis and lost to St. Joe's Prep. And that was another kind of game of, okay, this is where we need to get to. This is where we want to be. And last year they were the top seed in 6A, lost a hard-fought defensive game to Central Catholic in the WPIAL championship game. It was 10-7. Actually, you spoke about special teams. The difference in that game was Central Catholic's punter just kept flipping the field and flipping the field and flipping the field, and then he made like a 40 or 45-yard field goal, like a long field goal for a high school kid that wound up being the game winner to win it 10-7. And Pine Richland was just never able to drive it the whole length of the field on Central's defense. And then Central wound up losing to St. Joe's Prep in the semifinals, the state semis last year. So, it's one of those things where there's a lot of emotions on Pine Richland's side of they know what they need to do to get where they want to be to win that state title. And this has been something that's been building for 3 years for them. So it's going to be a great game. I'm really excited for it.
Would you think that there's more pressure on Pine Richland because of that?
Maybe a little bit. I think, I don't know if it's, pressure can create extra focus too. So it's kind of a two-way street that, sometimes pressure is a good thing. Sometimes with pressure, you rise to the occasion. It doesn't always make you, shrivel up and shrink. Sometimes pressure brings out the best in people too.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting. Look, I think it's going to be a very close game. I think it's going to be high scoring. I think it's going to be close. And quite honestly, I think that it could be, down to special teams, and what a perfect timing on the show that we got Coach in here just as we finished talking about, 5A there. So, going to be a great game.
The one thing I'll say is, given, how much Governor Mifflin runs the ball, just what I've seen over time from, run heavy teams, that if they get behind by a few scores, it's going to get interesting to see if the game plan changes and they try and take to the air against Pine Richland and then how it goes. Run heavy teams can have a lot of success for a long time, but the real test for those teams is always when they get behind by a few scores and how they deal with having to come back.
All I know is Governor Mifflin knows that Nick Singleton he's as good as a long pass. He can take it and break it from anywhere on the field. And, so, just keep handing the ball to Nick Singleton. He is going to break one in this game. There's no doubt in my mind. But is it going to be enough to offset that high-powered passing attack, from Pine Richland? Boy, that's going to be tough. But they showed that, pick your poison now. They ran the ball effectively against Peters Township now, and they've got that on film, so makes Governor Mifflin defend it.
Yep, exactly. Like Governor Mifflin's coach talked about with the option, that if you put something on film, the other team's gonna have to spend some time on it and try and figure it out. So it'll be a good one and be interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah, and it seemed like Eric was a bit, a little bit concerned about the fact that he may not have enough time for preparation, where Mifflin's been kind of sitting back, chomping at the bit. So, it is going to be pretty interesting.
Yeah, that was a very good point about the preparation time.
All
So,
right.
moving on to 4A here. This was the game of the week in the WPIAL. This was an absolute classic. Aliquippa was down. It was 7-7 at halftime. Aliquippa went down 28-14 after they turned the ball over and Thomas Jefferson scored. It was right around, Thomas Jefferson scored on the first play of the fourth quarter. So it was 28-14 basically at the outset of the fourth quarter. And Aliquippa basically abandoned the running game and started letting their quarterback Von Morris throw. And I'll tell you what, they should have let that kid throw more that game. I mean, he throws a really nice tight spiral, hit some passes on the sideline, hit some deep balls that, I mean, they got, to their credit, Aliquippa got 2 pass interference calls in the end zone too that helped them a little bit. But I mean, they were both perfectly thrown balls that if the TJ corner hadn't committed pass interference, it would have been caught for a touchdown. And they were just, some beautiful throws. So Aliquippa came back, tied it at 28. TJ scored first in overtime, and Aliquippa got the ball in overtime. They had it 3rd and goal from about the 5 or so, and threw an threw an interception in the end zone. Quarterback got pressured, was running out of the
Yeah.
pocket, tried to throw it up to someone, and
I saw the play there. I looked a little bit hurried on the throw.
Yeah, that's what happens. But we had talked about Thomas Jefferson. This is their 10th WPIAL championship. Aliquippa was a 1A size school forced to play up in 4A, and absolutely proved that they could play with the best the classification has to offer. I mean, they can play at this level and can compete with the likes of Thomas Jefferson. So they have nothing to hang their heads about at all. I mean, for a program like Aliquippa to compete with a school like Thomas Jefferson is a big feather in their cap that they were just played a great game. And they can hold their heads high after that one because both teams played really well, and it really could have gone either way at the end. Player of the game was Jake Pugh from Thomas Jefferson, their quarterback, threw for over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns and ran for 2 more, including the game winner in overtime. So, TJ moves on to the state playoffs once again. That's their 5th WPIAL title in the last 6 years, and they've just been a powerhouse there. Bill Chirpak, Thomas Jefferson's head coach, won his 9th WPIAL championship, which is the most of any head coach now. He surpassed Bob Palco for the most WPIAL titles of any head coach. And Thomas Jefferson now moves on to take on an Oil City team that is having a pretty historic year out of District 10.
Yeah.
Oil City definitely benefited from Cathedral Prep moving up and getting out of 4A. Oil City had actually played. This is interesting. So we talked about how the move to 6 classifications provided some more opportunities for teams,
Right.
and what had actually happened in District 10 the last couple years was 4A size schools were opting to play up in 5A just so they didn't have to face Cathedral Prep. Because Cathedral Prep was staying in 4A. And then this year when Cathedral Prep moved up to 5A, those other schools like Oil City moved back down to 4A because that's their natural classification. So
their benefit to that is they got to play TJ.
they get to play TJ now. But I mean, Oil City's been really good this year. They, averaging over 50 points a game, have a pretty well-balanced offense with the quarterback that's thrown for almost 1,000 and 2 running backs that have combined for over 2,100 yards this year. So it's going to be a good matchup. Cathedral Prep has given TJ some troubles in the past, so we'll see how it goes against Oil City. This is the first time they've ever made it this far in the state tournament. This TJ team is a little bit different than last year's team because last year's team, kind of like that 2017 Pine Richland team, graduated almost everyone. So the starters for TJ this year really didn't play a whole lot last year. Jake Pugh wasn't starting at quarterback. That was Shane Stump last year. Ian Hansen and Preston Zandier played a little bit. Preston Zandier is actually going to Youngstown State as a linebacker commit. His brother, Zane Zandier's at Virginia, I believe, as a linebacker commit as well. So, I mean, just, athletic family that's been really, really good for Thomas Jefferson over the last few years. And they're the defending 4A state champions. And it's the thing I'll mention about Thomas Jefferson too, they lost that game to McKeesport a couple weeks ago. came back, won a hard-fought game against Plum in the semifinals, beat Aliquippa in overtime. So even though their scoring margin's pretty high, they're a battle-tested team in tight situations and know what they need to do to come out with victories as well. And sometimes when you see these teams that have been blowing other teams out all year, you don't know how they're going to respond when they get in those tight situations, just because they haven't been tested at all.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting with Oil City. I mean, it's not like they don't have a pedigree. It's just like, they're just running into a brick wall, either Cathedral Prep or Thomas Jefferson or, whoever they've got to hit there. So, it's going to be very interesting. It's hard not to favor Thomas Jefferson in this matchup, but they shouldn't be looking past Oil City. I can tell you that.
Yeah, and really in these state games, it's really hard to predict because they haven't played any common opponents. You don't really know, how good each team is until they actually get on the field and play each other.
Yeah, and sometimes that's the best thing about the PIAA tournament is just that, Ian.
Yep. So looking at the tournament statewide here, we've got LS and Jersey Shore on the other side in the other semifinal. And I think you did the LS Elko game, didn't you?
Yeah, in fact, we were talking about who was going to win between Aliquippa and Thomas Jefferson at the LS game because because LS was knocked out by Thomas Jefferson last year. So, we were talking about that game on the sidelines. I like LS a lot. I like him for, quite honestly, I would consider it very much a draw between LS and Jersey Shore, with the exception of the fact that, LS is hosting the game. Jersey Shore's got to go an awful long way to get there. My buddy Daryl talks about how big that is, especially in the postseason, to be hosting a semifinal game like that is just huge. They've never been to LS, and LS is, football players and coaches and everybody's are creatures of habit. Well, that's just a big advantage, I think, for LS in this matchup. So, and the fact that they've been here before, they're trying to move beyond last year. Last year, okay, that may have been, that emotional wall that they hit when they had to play Thomas Jefferson. They're beyond that now. Their aspirations are Hershey, and I like their opportunity to get there.
Yeah, and that was, we talked a lot about the emotions for teams as well, and for Thomas Jefferson, that was a big emotional win for them last year when they got past Cathedral Prep finally. And really after they got past Cathedral Prep, it was like the sky was the limit for that team. They weren't slowing down for anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at Thomas Jefferson's titles, that 2015, 2016, 2017, they'd lost to Cathedral Prep in the playoffs each of those 3 years in the state playoffs.
Yeah.
And then in 2018 they lost in the WPIAL championship game to South Fayette on basically a goal line stand. TJ was driving down by 7 with under a minute to go and threw an interception on the goal line. And then in South Fayette lost to Cathedral Prep that year. So it was basically 4 years in a row that Cathedral Prep had knocked out the WPIAL champion. So when TJ finally got by him last year, they just breezed past everyone else because they were out for blood last year after they got past Cathedral Prep.
Yeah, clearly. All right, well, let's
on to 3A.
Wow.
Yep. We had Elizabeth Forward's coach Mike Colati on last week, and congratulations to him and their program for reaching their first WPIAL title game in school history. But
didn't he get a coaching award last week too, Coach Colati?
I think he did. Yeah, I think he won the Steelers Coach of the Week that they do.
Okay, yeah.
Which was great for him and his program because there's some money that comes with that as well. And they just ran into a Central Valley team that's mercy ruled everyone they played. I really had to, when I picked my player of the game here, I was like, I'm either going to pick 10 guys or one guy. So I picked Landon Alexander, who ran for 220 yards and 3 touchdowns. But Sean Fitzsimmons, their defensive lineman, he had probably 4 or 5 sacks in the first half. This game was over at halftime. It was, Central Valley just ran away with it. And Elizabeth Forward couldn't really move the ball at all on offense. They turned it over a few times. They had a punt blocked, and it was just, Central Valley
Hate to
when you
see
give a
that.
team like
You
that
hate to
short
see.
fields. And
You just hate
yeah,
to see that sometimes the moment can get a little bit too big for the team, or it just gets away from them. But they had a
well,
great season though.
they did, and this is a Central Valley team that I'm going to move on and we'll go back, but this is a Central Valley team that last year lost in the state championship game to Wyoming,
Mm-hmm.
and returned a lot of players from that team. And all year their talk has been, we're going to win the state championship. We're going to win the state championship. And that's atypical for a WPIAL team. Usually WPIAL teams' focus is win the WPIAL championship and then kind of see what happens in the state tournament. Like you said, that there's a lot of emotions that go into winning those district titles, and just the level of competition here in Western Pennsylvania is such that in the history of it all, that the WPIAL has been competing since I think in 1916 or 17 was the first year a WPIAL championship was awarded, and the state tournament didn't come around until the late 80s, 88. So a lot of teams' focus is just win the WPIAL and then see what happens with the state. We hope we win it, but if we don't, hey, WPIAL championship is awesome. But all year Central Valley's been talking about we want to win the state tournament. We want the state tournament. State championship's our focus. And they've mercy ruled everyone so far. So they've really rolled on through and have their sights set on that state title. Granted, there's a really good Wyomissing team on the other half of that bracket that they seem like they're on a collision course for. But they're going to have to get past a Bedford team, which, Bedford coming out of District 5, you don't often see a District 5 team this deep in the tournament. So a historically good season for the Bison out of Bedford, 10-0, have a really good dual threat quarterback in Mercury Swaim, who's passed for over 1,300 yards and run for over 1,100. It's a 33 total touchdowns this year. Pretty good wide receiver. So Central Valley is going to have to figure out how to defend him. The one thing I'll note for Central Valley is, they're loaded all over the field. Fitzsimmons, the defensive lineman, he's only a junior. He's already started getting D1 offers. Amir Dudley, their quarterback, who has thrown for over 1,000 yards for a team that's been able to run the ball so well they rarely have to pass. But Dudley just committed to Harvard, which is awesome for him. Congratulations to Amir. That actually just came out today. Miles Walker is kind of a slot back. He runs in, running, receiving, kick returning, 16 total touchdowns. Stephon Hall, defensive back. He's committed to Pitt. He is factored into the offense as well, but he got hurt last week in the championship game. He hurt his arm. I don't know. He was carrying the ball and kind of just fell down weird on it and was, bracing as he was going to the sideline, didn't come back in the game. So hopefully he's okay, but he's also their best defensive back, which could play a factor in trying to defend Bedford's passing game. But, like I said, Fitzsimmons had 3 or 4 sacks in the first half against Elizabeth Forward last week. So if Bedford can't block him out of the middle of that defensive tackle spot, then their quarterback's in for a long day as well.
Yeah, I like Central Valley's athleticism. It's just incredible, those guys. And but you never know. You get a turnover here and there, and Bedford starts to impose a little bit of their will. Hey, the best thing you can do is go out there and be physical, and so it's going to be a pretty interesting game, I think.
It is. And that's the thing with, Central Valley's mercy ruled everyone this year, 10 games, 10 mercy rules.
Right.
So one of those things, like we talked about, where if a team that's had that success all of a sudden is in a tight game in the fourth quarter, which they haven't been in all year, are those teams that are a little more battle tested, are they used to those situations again, rather than those teams that the starters have been out by halftime every week?
Yeah. No, and that's the thing too. I'll be honest with you. I think that what a lot of these coaches are working on in, this with some of these teams, it's as much in conditioning as it is in X's and O's, because these guys have not had to play 4 quarters all year. You look at across the board, which one of these teams has really had to play 4 quarters yet this year? Not any yet that I've seen, except for maybe TJ. But,
yeah,
most of the time. So I bet a lot of these coaches are just working on getting these guys back in shape and and then X's and O's too. But that's just my 2 cents.
And sustaining the mental focus that it takes to
Ah,
execute in those heavier situations.
yeah, exactly right. I mean, you can't simulate a tight game. I can tell you this though, when Coach Lang was talking about, uh, they had to basically, practice, in a game situation. They threw in a wildcat situation before, and they came out of halftime with that. Before they went to half, I don't know, they were up by 35 points, but they got the ball with less than 2 minutes to go. And what did they do? They practiced their 2-minute drill,
Mm-hmm.
and went down, and it was successful. It was effective. And they scored a touchdown. There was less than 2 minutes to go in the half. So they've got that feeling they can draw on that. But like you said, a lot of these teams, they don't have the game experience of certain situations, especially, close games. So that's always going to be interesting.
Yep. And I really hope we get to see a Central Valley Wyomissing state final here, because that both of those teams have seemingly been on a collision course all year, that they've more or less, whatever state ranking you want to look at, been number 1 or number 2 in the state. So hopefully we get to see the two of them face off in Hershey.
I got a lot of friends over there in the Wyomissing sideline. It's very interesting. Just a little anecdote or a little story here. And this was not this year, but last year. First practice of the year, first padded practice of the year. I go over to WPIAL. I'm, there for the morning practice, sitting on the bench next to Coach Bob Wolfram. And he's telling me how he thinks that not this year, but next year, that this team could be a state champion. So he knew before the season started last year that these guys were going to be good. And so here they are, and this is a guy who won, the 2012 AA championship. So I think he has an idea that these guys are pretty good, as do, I think, most everybody in the state. So yeah, I hope so too.
Yep. And a shout out to Danville too. I mean, pretty historically good season for them as well, making it to the state semis. So, but it just seems like Central Valley and Wyomissing are just two trains on the track, and they're going to collide in Hershey, and everyone else is kind of just standing in their way.
Yep. We'll see what happens. That's why we play the games, right?
It's true. In 2A, this game, the score is much, much closer than the game actually was. Beaver Falls was up 28-0 at halftime. They scored early in the third quarter to go up 36-0, so the clock started ticking. And then, the clock started, mercy rules, clock started running, and then Stowe Rock started scoring. They hit a big pass play. They converted 2 onside kicks. They scored a couple more touchdowns. Beaver Falls had their backup defense in the game, because someone asked their coach about it afterwards. He was like, "Yeah, we had our backup defense in the game, and they scored 30 points against us." So, but we talked about this before, that Stowe Rocks was a team that could score from anywhere with their passing game. So the 13-point final score was not really as indicative of how much of a blowout this game was. That Beaver Falls was, I mean, they were up 36-0, and then Stowe Rocks stormed back, and Beaver Falls scored another touchdown to more or less.
Did they put the first team back in?
No, I don't think so.
I've seen that happen before in a playoff game.
Yeah. No, because Josh Huff, who's Beaver Falls star running back, who's going to Syracuse, I mean, he had, I think, 96 yards and 2 touchdowns in the first half, and only finished with 104. So he didn't go back in. But 5th WPIAL championship for Beaver Falls. Here's a trivia question for you that you may know. Do you know who Beaver Falls quarterback was on that 1960 championship team?
Well, Joe Namath.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. So Beaver Falls won the 2016 WPIAL and state championship, looking to do it again here in 2020. really good matchup here against Wilmington out of District 10. Another Western Pennsylvania
Wow.
matchup.
I mean, there's a couple of heavyweights there for you.
Yeah, heavyweights that have seen success, and actually schools that aren't too far apart either. Because I mean, Beaver Falls is kind of in northern Beaver County, and then Wilmington is in Lawrence County, so not too far away. Neighboring counties that, not neighboring districts, but neighboring counties. And it's going to be a good one. Both teams like to run the ball a lot. Beaver Falls' tandem of Josh Huff and Shalik Livingston's kind of run over everyone this year, but that combo of Ethan Susan and Darren Miller, they ran for a lot of yards last week too. I was kind of watching, Bob Greenberg tweet out the stats from the D10 games, and they were running all over the place as well. I think Susan scored 6 touchdowns last week or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, and I don't know. Actually, I didn't look on the Go Erie website when I pulled these stats. I don't know if these included the past week's games or not. I know that the WPIAL stats include the past week's games. I don't know if the Wilmington stats include last week's game or not. But nevertheless, those are still their 2 top players, and these are 2 teams that want to run the ball. Wilmington reached the state championship game in 17 and 18, lost to Southern Columbia, and Wilmington lost to Avonworth, who was the WPIAL 2A champion last year in the semifinals. So Wilmington's been to this point a lot before. They've won a lot of championships. Interestingly enough, Wilmington actually played in the WPIAL for some time as well. So those first 2 district championships they won in 87 and 88 were actually WPIAL championships, not D10 championships. Yeah.
Wow. This is one of those games where you almost hate to see one of these teams lose.
Yeah.
I mean, because, such good programs, but only one team can be state champion. So that's why we do it.
Well, that team's probably going to be Southern Columbia too, just considering how the 2A bracket shakes out. Bishop McDevitt got there out of District 12. We'll see if they actually get to keep playing or not, just because of Philly's new rules about COVID, because that is the Bishop McDevitt from Philadelphia, not the one from Harrisburg. But so we'll see. But I mean, this Beaver Falls Wilmington game is a premier matchup between 2 really, really good teams, and one of them will get to face Southern Columbia, and good luck. We'll see what happens. Although Richland kind of gave Southern Columbia a bit of a game.
Yeah, not so fast. Like Lee Corso says, not so fast. And just handing the title to Southern Columbia this year. I think a team like Beaver Falls could give them some trouble. You get a transcendent player, and they had a hot game and whatever like that. Not so fast on Southern Columbia, just waltz. Now, clearly I like them this week to get the Hershey. We'll see. I think that everybody's rooting for them to have a close game and a championship game because they've had such walkovers, in the last few years. And a lot of what it was last year was they had the game handed to them. I think they had 21 points off of turnovers, I think, in
through a
the
couple
first
pick
half.
sixes.
And, it was, it wasn't the best in that. But so I think I'll tell you what, I think a championship game for whoever comes out of the one side of the bracket, I think it's going to be a lot closer championship game than what people might think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit biased, but I personally think that Beaver Falls can compete with Southern Columbia because not only do they have the great rushing tandem with Josh Huff and Shalik Livingston, but I mean, they've got a quarterback in Jaron Brickner who he's only averaging 9 pass attempts per game because they're so good on the ground, but he's thrown for 900 yards. So you figure, I mean, he's averaging basically 100 yards passing a game and only throwing the ball 9 times. So, and obviously not even all those are completions that, he's basically had 40 completions for 900 yards. So, I mean, they're a a big play offense that can hit you from anywhere, whether it's on the ground or through the air. They just haven't had to throw that much this year because they've been so good on the ground. I mean, when you've got Josh Huff ripping off, a 97-yard touchdown one week, an 85-yard touchdown the next week, makes a big difference.
It does make a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and Huff's a big player too. That's the other thing is he's got, especially at the 2A level, his combination of size and speed is something that you don't see very often at this level. For players in bigger classifications, yeah. But I mean, he's measured in at like probably around 6'2", 245, give or take, and I mean, and he can move, so that makes a big difference too. He's hard to bring down. He actually, I saw an interview with him. He talked about how he watches Derrick Henry's highlights and how he tries to emulate Henry's balance and to pick his knees up higher when guys are around his feet so that they can't trip him up and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Yep. I think I'll go back for a second, but other than what is our premier game of the week between Pine Richland and Governor Mifflin, I think this Beaver Falls Wilmington game is probably the second best.
It's 1 and 1A. I think so.
Yeah. The surprise of the weekend was Jeanette just pounding Clairton. So this was Clairton kind of shot themselves in the foot. They committed 5 turnovers in the first half. Clairton's star running back, Dante Sanders, who we talked about all year a couple weeks ago, you remember he ran for 400 yards and 6 touchdowns. He got hurt in the first quarter. He went out, went into the locker room, came back with his arm in a sling, never came back in the game. So that made a big difference for Clairton. I mean, when you have, the guy who is most of your offense go down, they were really never able to get anything started, and they just kept turning the ball over. Jaden Kennedy, who's a sophomore linebacker for Jeanette, had 2 return touchdowns. He blocked a punt, returned it for a touchdown, then scooped up a fumble. And at the end of the first half, Clairton was only down 21-7 and had the ball inside the 10-yard line, and Kennedy got an interception at the goal line to stop a scoring threat too. I mean, if Clairton scores there, the game's 21-14 at halftime. That's a big difference between 21-14 and 21-7 too.
Right.
So and then Roberto Smith for Jeanette had a rushing touchdown, was filling in at quarterback, threw a pass touchdown, kicked a field goal, had an interception, and had a fumble recovery. I mean, he was all over the field as well. So, I mean, Jeanette's another team. They're just loaded with talented players. We talked last week about how Jeanette had an 8-point loss to Clairton early in the year, and that was their only loss this season, but they were starting a freshman quarterback in Brad Birch, who just gotten better as the season's gone on. So Birch twisted his ankle. Hopefully he's able to come back and play this week. But Jeanette, I believe, based on what research I've been able to find, was the first team to ever mercy rule Clairton.
Wow.
And now the mercy rule went into effect in 1988. So, a little bit of a caveat there that Clairton's been playing for a long time, and 1988 is not that long ago. But nevertheless, Jeanette did enact the mercy rule on him. And Jeanette scoring 45 points was the most points Clairton had given up in a long time. I think since the mid 90s, like 94 or 95, I think they gave up 50 points to Beth Center.
Wow.
But since 2000 is definitely the most that Clairton's given up. The most I could find, Clairton gave up 44 points to a team out of Ohio that they played one time, I think in 2007, and then gave up 42 a couple other times. They gave up 42 last year to McGuffey, who was a 2A team that they played, and Clairton's a 1A team. So they gave up 42 to Aliquippa a few years ago also, who Aliquippa was playing in 3A and Clairton's in 1A. So, bit of a difference there. But again, it's like a fellow evenly matched 1A opponent. This was the most points Clairton had given up in a long time. But, I mean, when you commit 6 turnovers and at least 4 of them, 2 got returned for touchdowns, and a couple others gave Jeanette the ball basically like inside the 30-yard line or in the red zone. So, you give a team like Jeanette short fields, they're going to capitalize and they're going to put points on the board. So congratulations to Jeanette, though. They're a team that's been really, really, really good and just hasn't been able to get past Clairton. Jeanette moved down from AA to single A back in 2014, and is like 75-3 against everyone not named Clairton, and 3-8 now against Clairton. This was only their third win against Clairton in that time. So Clairton had beat them twice in WPIAL championships games, a bunch of other times. There was a lot of pent up emotions for Jeanette that kind of got taken out in this game too. Jeanette got knocked out by Stowe Rocks in the first round of the playoffs last year, and we're really chomping at the bit that they've been arguably one of the best teams in the state, and just kind of always ran into that behemoth that was Clairton in their conference and then in the WPIAL playoffs. So now that they're into the state playoffs, they won the state title in 2017. They've got a dynamic passing attack with Brad Birch, who throws to his brother Brett, who's a receiver. Roberto Smith's a really good running back. Their defense is really sound. But they're taking on a Reynolds team out of District 10 who is kind of
sell those guys short.
No. And the thing about like we talked about with Oil City, Reynolds always kind of ran up against Farrell, who was kind of the 1A powerhouse in District 10, and Farrell got forced up into 2A this year by the success formula. So Farrell playing in 2A now opened the door for Reynolds to win the D10 championship, and now has a semifinal game against Jeanette. Reynolds is a pretty run-heavy team, so really just rely on Cole Toy most of the time.
So are you still, this is a perfect example of, I know that there's a lot of guys up in District 10 area, 910, that, why 6 classifications. This Reynolds is a perfect example of why 6 classifications, and why, the PIAA has put in, the success formula and everything like that. I mean, its design is to give other teams an opportunity.
Yeah, and I'd say Reynolds is a success story of the PIAA success formula more than the 6 classes, because with 6 classes it was Farrell that was dominating 1A, but then Farrell got moved up to 2A and has to play Wilmington now. And those two teams played 2 great games this year. Yeah. D10 went to some regional scheduling, and Farrell and Wilmington played. Actually, they might have played 3 times this year, because I think they might have met in the playoffs, which is a rarity that high school teams play each other 3 times in a season.
Wow.
But Wilmington obviously emerged victorious there, and then Reynolds won the single A title. So and we've talked about this before. I like the on-field factor of the success formula. I don't like the transfer part of it. I wish they'd just consider the on-field factor, and I also wish they'd add sort of a unsuccess factor, that teams that are bad have the opportunity to move down in classification. Teams like you're just thinking here locally, Uniontown has a 35-game losing streak, and they're in 4A. And they played in 3A the last 2 years, and their enrollment moved them up to 4A this year. And if you go 0-10 2 years in a row in 3A and then have to move up to 4A, you're not going to be able to compete. It's just that. So I wish there was some other way that they could, move them down, let them. And the problem is, when you have losing streaks like that, no one wants to come out for the team. No one wants to play. So,
well, look, how teams do that is they'll try and move down a section in their own league rather than a classification than the PIAA. I mean, Lancaster Lebanon League is notorious about moving, 5A and 6A schools down to section 3 or 4, just to kind of get them to rise up, at least from a win-loss percentage. So
yeah, WPIAL doesn't do that. The conferences are all based on classification.
Yeah,
and the WPIAL had pulled their coaches this past year because they were looking at doing something like that, and the coaches and administrators pretty resoundingly said, no, we want to keep it with classifications. So it's kind of how it is here. I think 1A top to bottom in the state bracket is probably the best Final Four that we have.
Totally agree.
With Jeanette, Bishop Guilfoyle, Steel High, and Reynolds. 3 of those 4 teams have won state championships before. So I think top to bottom, as far as 4 semifinalists go, I think this is the best, most evenly matched group. Steel High Bishop Guilfoyle is going to be a really, really good matchup on the right side of that bracket.
Yeah, it is. Steel High, their win over Old Forge was probably the game of the week. last week in the PIAA tournament. It was like an untimed down at the end of the game, and Steel High threw a touchdown pass into the back of the end zone to win it. So yeah, that was, in my mind, that was the game of the week in the PIAA. But yeah, you're right. I mean, yeah, it's probably from top to bottom here, the final teams, probably the most competitive, and one where, even though Jeanette, obviously from the WPIAL there, hey, it's anybody's ball game, I think, here in 1A.
Yep. Yeah, and I think didn't Steel High's head coach tweet out that there was 7 years ago Old Forge had beat them in the playoffs and they were coming for revenge this week or something like, maybe it was their one of their assistant coaches, something like that. But
I didn't see that from Coach Irby, honestly, but hey, old losses die hard. I mean,
they do.
Coach Eric talked about the fact of, he couldn't he couldn't remember to pick up milk for his wife, but he remembers what happened 7 years ago on a 3rd and 10, in the 5th game of the season,
Yep.
So I wouldn't put it past the coach.
Yeah. Oh, definitely not. Yeah, but I agree with you. I like Jeanette's chances here to get to Hershey, and I think this will be a really good state title game against whoever makes it from the right side, whether it's Steel High or Bishop Guilfoyle. And
that's impossible for me to pick. Steel High, very athletic. Bishop Guilfoyle, what a pedigree, and another good team. So that's why we play it, man. I keep saying that, but gonna be a lot of fun. But wow, man. So we're there. I mean, we're on the precipice of actually getting to Hershey. I think we had a wonderful show this week with Coach Lang and Coach Eric from Pine Richland. I mean, it just it's tough to pick just one game to be the game of the week, isn't it?
It is. And as we get down to this point, I mean, like we talked about, there's 3 premier matchups this week statewide, and I think the Pine Richland Governor Mifflin game's the best of the bunch, but that Beaver Falls Wilmington game, that Bishop Guilfoyle Steel High game, they're, like you said, impossible to predict because they just look so evenly matched on paper. And it's hard to judge these teams when you get into the state tournament, kind of how they stack up against each other because they haven't played common opponents. At least in the district tournaments, you can say, oh, this team beat this team by this much. So, kind of get a sense for how good they are. But at this point, it's anyone's guess of how it's all going to shake out. And we'll see. I mean, don't sleep on these District 10 teams either. They've had success in the state tournaments as well. I mean, Wilmington's had success. Farrell's had success. Let's not forget, Farrell won the last couple state titles in single A. So, and had to move up to 2A because of it. The one other thing I'll note too is that the other part of the state success formula that no one really talked about at the beginning was that if a team is forced up and gets 3, 4, or 5 success points in the next cycle, they have to stay up. So for Aliquippa, they already got 2 for making it to the WPIAL championship game. So if Aliquippa had beaten TJ, they would have had to stay up in 4A next year, and potentially if they had gone farther next year, I mean, they could get to that 6 number and get forced up into 5A, which would just be crazy for a single A size school.
That's just not fair.
So,
I don't care what it is. That's just not fair.
No, it's not. And where the difference really comes in is, and I kind of started to notice it a little bit, but Aliquippa was just so darn good. They overcame it. Was that in the second half, you had guys for TJ who were only playing on one side of the ball, whether it was offense or defense, and the kids from Aliquippa are playing on both sides of the ball.
Right.
And by the fourth quarter, and when you get into overtime, that starts to make a difference. Granted, Aliquippa just had a great comeback at the end and kind of overcame that fatigue that their athletes just made plays all over the field to get them back in that game. And huge credit to them for hanging in there. But that's really where you start to notice it is not in a single game. I think in a single game, Aliquippa can play with anyone. In one game on a neutral field anywhere, Aliquippa can play with anyone. But over the course of a season, as you start to have injuries, you have to go deeper into your roster. As you play longer into games, it does start to wear on you a little bit more when you're playing on both sides of the ball and you play against teams that have kids only playing on one side of the ball. So, that's my 2 cents on it. My parting thought is that since we're into the state tournament, I wore my WPIAL versus All Yins shirt tonight.
Oh,
So,
brother. Oh, brother.
So here we go with
That's
the heavy
okay.
District 7 bias.
Ian, I can tell you, this has just been a blast all year for me. It's kind of nice now that it's coming full circle that we're, getting the WPIAL teams involved in the state tournament and state tournament matchups, and it's an enormous amount of fun. And hopefully everybody will, stay tuned for next week when it'll be the Hershey edition of the WPIAL or WPIAL Blitz show.
You're coming
You
around
call it
to it.
WPIAL. I got to call it something different. I can't call it the WPIAL.
Yes, you can.
It is. But anyway, hey, listen, thanks everybody for hanging in with us. We want to thank once again Coach Jeff Lang from Governor Mifflin and Eric Kasperowitz from Pine Richland. Really appreciate them taking time out of a very busy week to talk to Ian and myself. For me this week, I'll be at the Pine Richland Mifflin game Saturday, but actually Friday night, I'll actually be at the LS Jersey Shore game. So going to get my taste of 4A and 5A this week, and then we'll be back once again with the WPIAL Blitz show next week. All right, Ian?
All right. State championship edition next week.
Yeah, thanks a lot, everybody, and we will talk to you on the flip side.